August 23rd, 1942, 4:16 in the afternoon. Outskirts of Stalingrad, on the western bank of the Volga River. The air vibrates before anyone sees the planes. Children stop playing in a courtyard framed by brick apartment blocks. A tram grinds to a halt in the middle of the street. Factory workers at the Red October plant look up from molten steel as a low hum becomes a rolling thunder. Then the sky darkens. Hundreds of aircraft from the Luftwaffe sweep over the city in tight formation. Bomb bay doors open in perfect sequence. The first explosions hit the oil storage tanks near the river. Fire climbs into the sky like a living thing. Windows shatter across entire districts. The Volga itself begins to burn. On the southern approach, Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov feels the ground kick beneath his boots. He is 23 years old, a railway worker before the war. Now he grips a rifle that feels too light for the noise around him. The sky pulses orange and black. Ash falls like snow. You can imagine the sound. Not one blast, but thousands. Not chaos, but rhythm. Bomb after bomb after bomb. Far to the west, in a field headquarters near the Don River, maps cover a long wooden table. Red arrows cut deep into Soviet territory. Officers speak in calm voices. They have been moving east for weeks now, pushing past broken defenses, capturing towns whose names most of them had never heard before. At the center of the operation stands the 6th Army, commanded by Friedrich Paulus. He is careful, methodical, a planner more than a gambler. His troops have crossed rivers under fire. They have marched across open steppe under a sun that seems endless. Dust coats their uniforms. Engines overheat. Still, they advance. Behind them lies a trail that stretches back through Ukraine, past the Dnieper, all the way to the German frontier. Supply trucks rumble along narrow roads. Horses pull artillery through fields already turning dry and brittle. Fuel arrives late. Ammunition arrives later. But in late summer, the problems feel distant. The Volga glitters ahead like a prize. In a command post hundreds of miles away, Adolf Hitler studies reports from the Eastern Front. The name Stalingrad carries weight. It is not just a city. It bears the name of Joseph Stalin himself. Taking it would be more than a military gain. It would be symbolic, a message. To American ears, the scale is hard to grasp. Imagine Chicago under constant air attack. Imagine an industrial city of more than 400,000 people caught in a storm of steel and fire. That is Stalingrad in late August. Back in the city, Sergeant Sokolov crawls through debris toward a group of civilians trapped beneath a collapsed wall. He can taste brick dust. His ears ring. The bombing does not stop for hours. By nightfall, entire neighborhoods are flattened. Thousands are dead. The rest huddle in basements as flames consume what remains above. Across the river, ferries still run. They move wounded soldiers east. They bring fresh units west. Even under bombardment, the Volga becomes a lifeline. Barges cross in darkness, guided by small lanterns shielded from the sky. The next morning, German ground forces approach the northern outskirts. Tanks roll forward in columns. Infantry follow close behind. The air smells of smoke and oil. What was once a city is now a maze of shattered concrete and twisted steel. A young German lieutenant named Karl Weiss steps through rubble that used to be a school. He is 26, raised in Munich, educated in engineering. He expected open fields and swift maneuvers. Instead, he finds himself staring into cellars where Soviet soldiers wait in silence. Urban war is different. There are no clear front lines. A building taken at dawn can be lost by noon. A single staircase becomes a battlefield. Paulus sends reports upward. The city is burning. Resistance remains strong. Casualties are rising. Yet the orders from above are clear. Advance. Capture the city. Reach the Volga. As September approaches, both sides pour men into the ruins. The Red Army sends divisions across the river under constant fire. Many never make it. Those who do step directly into combat. There is no rear area. No safe zone. Mikhail Sokolov finds himself defending a warehouse one day, a railway embankment the next. He sleeps in short bursts, rifle across his chest. He watches comrades fall and feels something harden inside him. Fear remains, but it no longer controls his hands. Karl Weiss writes a brief letter home. He does not describe the bodies in the streets. He does not mention the smell. He writes about progress, about nearing the river, about confidence. Above them all, the summer sun begins to lower earlier each evening. The heat fades, the wind shifts. Neither side yet understands that the real enemy has not arrived. The Volga keeps flowing, calm and indifferent. Smoke drifts across its surface. On the western bank, the 6th Army pushes deeper into a city that refuses to collapse. In Berlin, optimism fills the air. Reports speak of imminent victory. The city will fall. The campaign will continue south toward oil fields. The war, many believe, is entering its final phase. But in the ruins of Stalingrad, under broken walls and burning skies, a different story is already taking shape. September 14, 1942. Dawn breaks through a curtain of smoke over central Stalingrad. The first light reveals a city transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Buildings stand like hollow shells. Streets are filled with bricks, splintered beams, and the remains of trams frozen in place. The Volga glows pale gray under a sky that no longer feels like summer. German artillery opens fire before sunrise. Karl Weiss crouches behind a shattered wall as shells crash into Soviet positions near the riverbank. Each explosion sends fragments of masonry into the air. He hears the whistle before the impact now. He has learned that sound. The Sixth Army pushes forward block by block. Their objective is simple on paper: reach the Volga and cut off Soviet reinforcements. In reality, every apartment, every factory hall becomes a battlefield. At the Red October factory complex, steel beams twist under artillery fire, but still stand. Inside, Soviet soldiers move between machines that once forged tools and tractors. Now those same halls echo with rifle shots. Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov presses his back against a lathe. The metal is cold despite the fires outside. He waits for footsteps on the stairwell. His unit has been reduced to less than half strength. New arrivals come at night across the river, wide-eyed and pale, clutching rifles, still smelling of oil. The fighting shrinks to distances measured in feet. A German soldier throws a grenade through a doorway. A Soviet soldier answers with a burst from a submachine gun. Dust clouds fill the air. Visibility drops to nothing. Men fire at shapes, at sounds, at movement. The battle earns a grim nickname among the German troops: Rattenkrieg, Rat War. Not because the enemy lacks courage, but because both sides move through holes in walls and tunnels beneath floors, appearing suddenly and vanishing just as quickly. Karl Weiss steps into what used to be an office building. A piano lies on its side in the lobby. A portrait hangs crooked on a cracked wall. He hears shuffling above him. He signals to his men. They move up the stairs, slowly. Halfway up, a burst of gunfire erupts from the landing. One of his soldiers falls backward. Weiss feels the shock before the fear. He orders suppressing fire. The stairwell fills with smoke and splinters. By the time the floor is secured, 3 of his men are down. He does not pause long enough to process it. Orders demand speed. Momentum must be maintained. Across the river, commanders in the Soviet 62nd Army organize desperate defenses. Among them is General Vasily Chuikov, who adopts a brutal but effective tactic. Soviet units stay as close as possible to German lines, sometimes within the same building. The closeness limits German air support. Bombs drop too near risk hitting their own troops. Sokolov learns this rule quickly. Stay close. Never give them distance. At night, the Volga becomes a corridor of shadows. Boats cross under artillery fire. Searchlights sweep the water. Some boats sink without a trace. Others arrive with reinforcements who step directly into gunfire. Food grows scarce. Water must be drawn from wells or the river itself. Ammunition is counted carefully. In late September, German forces reach the Volga in several sectors. From certain high points, they can see the river stretching north and south. For a moment, it appears that victory is within reach. Hitler receives reports that most of the city is under German control. The tone in headquarters grows confident again. The Sixth Army is praised for its determination. The name Stalingrad seems almost secured, but maps can deceive. Though German troops hold large portions of the city, Soviet forces cling to narrow strips along the riverbank. These pockets, sometimes only a few hundred yards deep, refuse to collapse. They absorb punishment and continue to resist. Sokolov finds himself defending a grain elevator overlooking the Volga. The structure is massive, concrete walls scarred by shell impacts. Inside, grain spills across the floor, mixing with dust and blood. The building becomes a fortress. German units assault it repeatedly. Each time they are pushed back at heavy cost. Karl Weiss watches through binoculars as flames lick at the upper floors. He admires the stubbornness of the defenders even as he prepares another attack. He feels the strain on his men. Supplies arrive more slowly now. Trucks must travel farther. Roads are crowded. The front is stretched thin. The weather shifts again. Mornings carry a sharper chill. Frost appears on metal surfaces before sunrise. Neither side has winter clothing ready. By October, the city is reduced to isolated strongpoints. Entire battalions fight over single factory workshops. A staircase may change hands 5 times in a day. Snipers operate from broken windows, patient and unseen. Sokolov no longer recognizes entire districts. He navigates by memory, by the shape of collapsed walls and the angle of a leaning smokestack. Weiss feels something else creeping in. Fatigue. His men have been fighting without pause for weeks. Replacement troops arrive, but they are young and untested. Veterans are fewer each day, yet orders from above remain unchanged. Take the city. Eliminate resistance. Secure the Volga. As October ends, German forces control nearly 90% of Stalingrad. The river traffic is under constant fire. It seems only a matter of time before the last Soviet defenders are crushed. But beyond the city limits, on the open steppe to the north and south, Soviet commanders are preparing something far larger than a defense of ruins. The wind grows colder, the ground hardens, and far from the shattered factories and burning warehouses, armored formations begin to move into position, unseen and underestimated. November 19th, 1942. 7:30 in the morning. Northwest of Stalingrad, near the Don River bend. The steppe is white with frost. German sentries stamp their boots against the cold. The wind slices through thin greatcoats. Engines struggle to start. The ground is hard as stone. In the distance, a low rumble begins. At first, it sounds like distant thunder. Then the horizon flashes. Hundreds of Soviet guns open fire at once. The barrage rolls across the frozen plain in waves, shaking the earth beneath trenches and gun pits. Shells crash into Romanian positions, guarding the northern flank of the German Sixth Army. Entire sections of line disappear in smoke. Karl Weiss feels the shock even inside the city. The sound carries across miles of open ground. He looks toward the northwest skyline and sees a faint gray curtain rising. He does not yet understand what it means. The German advance into Stalingrad had stretched their forces thin. To hold the long flanks along the Don and south of the city, Allied units from Romania, Hungary, and Italy had been assigned defensive positions. Many lacked heavy anti-tank weapons. Many lacked winter gear. Across the steppe, Soviet tank crews wait inside steel hulls, breath fogging in the cold air. When the artillery lifts, engines roar to life. Operation Uranus has begun. Columns of T-34 tanks surge forward through gaps torn in the lines. Infantry follow close behind, riding on hulls or running beside them. Snow and dirt spray outward as tracks churn across the plain. Within hours, the northern flank begins to collapse. Romanian units attempt to regroup, but Soviet armor pushes through weak points with speed and precision. Communication lines break, command posts are overrun. Trucks clog narrow roads as soldiers attempt to pull back. South of Stalingrad, on November 20th, another massive assault strikes the German Allied forces holding the southern flank. The pattern repeats. Artillery, shock, armor. The trap begins to close. Inside Stalingrad, Karl Weiss receives orders to hold position. Rumors ripple through the ranks. Soviet breakthroughs, flank units retreating. Uncertain reports. He studies a map with fellow officers. 2 red arrows push inward from north and south, curving toward each other behind the Sixth Army. Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov hears different rumors. Word spreads through Soviet positions that a great offensive is underway beyond the city. He dares not hope too quickly. The fighting inside Stalingrad continues without pause. German units still press against their shrinking riverbank defenses. But by November 23, 1942, near the town of Kalash on the Don, Soviet spearheads link up. The encirclement is complete. More than 200,000 German and Allied troops find themselves surrounded. Snow begins to fall. Karl Weiss stands in a cellar as a radio operator adjusts the receiver, trying to catch headquarters. The message comes through in broken fragments. The Sixth Army is cut off. Resupply by air will begin immediately. Hold positions. Await further orders. Hold positions. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler issues a clear command. The Sixth Army will not break out. It will stand fast. Supplies will be delivered by air until relief forces arrive. For the men inside the pocket, the words feel distant and unreal. Paulus studies his situation carefully. Fuel reserves are low, ammunition stocks are shrinking. Food supplies were calculated for an advancing army, not one trapped in place. Winter tightens its grip. Temperatures drop below zero. Engines freeze overnight. Weapons jam. Frostbite spreads through units that lack proper clothing. Horses collapse in the snow. The Luftwaffe attempts to supply the encircled army by air. Transport planes fly through snowstorms and Soviet fighter patrols. They land on makeshift airstrips carved from frozen ground. Crates of food and ammunition are unloaded quickly, but the numbers do not add up. The Sixth Army requires hundreds of tons of supplies each day. The aircraft deliver far less. Some days, bad weather grounds flights entirely. Karl Weiss opens a crate, expecting rations. Inside, he finds medical bandages and small arms ammunition. Necessary, but not enough. His men divide thin slices of bread. They melt snow for water. The cold becomes constant, like a second skin. Sokolov, still fighting inside the city, notices something changing. German attacks grow less frequent. Artillery fire becomes sporadic. Prisoners taken in small raids look exhausted, hollow-eyed. The Volga freezes along its edges. Soviet forces tighten the ring. They push inward from the steppe while maintaining pressure within the city itself. The encircled troops are squeezed from 2 directions. In December, a German relief attempt begins from the southwest. Armored units push toward the pocket, hoping to break through. For a moment, hope flickers among the trapped soldiers. Karl Weiss hears that friendly tanks are within 50 miles, then 40, then 30. But Soviet resistance stiffens. The relief force stalls. The distance remains too great. Orders from above remain unchanged. Stand fast, hold Stalingrad. By late December, the pocket has shrunk. Airfields fall into Soviet hands one by one. Each loss reduces the already limited air supply. Men grow thinner. Faces become gaunt. Frost cracks skin and splits lips. Letters home stop. On the steppe, snow drifts over abandoned equipment. Inside the ruins of Stalingrad, silence settles in places that once echoed with constant gunfire. The trap has closed completely, and winter has only just begun. January 8th, 1943. Morning. Inside the shrinking pocket west of the Volga. A Soviet envoy approaches under a white flag. He carries an offer: surrender, humane treatment, medical care for the wounded, an end to the suffering. Inside a dim command shelter, officers of the 6th Army listen as terms are read aloud. Frost clings to the beams overhead. Breath hangs in the air. The temperature inside is barely warmer than outside. Friedrich Paulus says little. The message is relayed to higher command. The reply from Adolf Hitler arrives quickly. The 6th Army will not surrender. It will fight on. Relief is promised again. Karl Weiss stands outside the shelter when the decision spreads through the ranks. No surrender. He watches the faces around him. No one cheers. No one speaks of honor or glory. They are too tired for that. Rations have fallen to almost nothing. A thin soup made from horse meat is shared among squads. Sometimes there is no soup at all. Men scrape frost from walls and chew on frozen bread so hard it cracks teeth. Fuel is gone. Vehicles sit buried in snow. Artillery pieces cannot be moved. Wounded soldiers lie in unheated cellars, wrapped in blankets stiff with ice. The airlift continues in smaller and smaller numbers. Transport planes land under fire when weather allows. Many never arrive. Some crash on icy runways. Others are shot down before reaching the pocket. Each crate unloaded is surrounded by desperate hands. On January 10th, the Soviet offensive resumes with crushing force. Thousands of guns open fire again, this time aimed directly into the encircled area. The bombardment lasts for hours. The ground shakes continuously. Snow turns black with soot. Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov advances cautiously through the ruins that once marked the outer districts of the city. The front line has shifted. Now the Germans are on the defensive everywhere. He moves past burned-out tanks half buried in snow. He sees abandoned guns and frozen horses still harnessed to wagons. The scale of the destruction feels endless. Karl Weiss and what remains of his company are ordered to hold a sector near an airfield. The runway is a narrow strip carved from ice and rubble. Every landing is a risk. Every takeoff feels like a miracle. On some days, no aircraft appear at all. The relief force that once moved towards Stalingrad has been forced to withdraw. The distance that seemed possible in December now feels impossible. The 6th Army stands alone. Paulus receives a promotion on January 30th, 1943. He is made a field marshal. The message carries an unspoken expectation. No German field marshal has ever surrendered. In a cold underground headquarters, Paulus studies the map of what remains of his army. The pocket has split into two parts, north and south. Communications between them are fragile. Units are reduced to fragments of their former strength. Outside, Karl Weiss leans against a frozen wall. His uniform hangs loosely now. His cheeks are hollow. He thinks about Munich, about warm kitchens and crowded streets. The memory feels distant, like something from another life. Sokolov and his unit move forward cautiously. They encounter scattered resistance, but nothing like the fierce assaults of September. German soldiers fire a few rounds, then fall silent. Some raise white cloth. Others sit in trenches, too weak to stand. On January 31st, Soviet troops reach the southern command post. Paulus is informed that Soviet forces are at the door. He chooses to surrender the southern group of the 6th Army. Karl Weiss hears the news in fragments. Some units refuse to believe it. Others lay down their weapons quietly. There is no dramatic moment, no final charge, just exhaustion. In the northern pocket, resistance continues for 2 more days. Then, on February 2nd, 1943, it ends. More than 90,000 German soldiers go into captivity. Among them are thousands who are wounded or ill. The once powerful 6th Army ceases to exist as a fighting force. Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov stands on a ridge overlooking what remains of the city. Smoke still rises from isolated fires. Snow covers shattered factories and broken rail lines. The Volga lies frozen and silent. He feels no celebration, only relief and a heavy awareness of the cost. Karl Weiss, now a prisoner, walks eastward with other captured soldiers. The wind bites at his face. He does not look back. The battle that began with fire in August ends in silence under gray winter skies, but its impact will echo far beyond the ruins of Stalingrad. February 3rd, 1943. Berlin. The announcement is brief. The 6th Army has been lost at Stalingrad. For months, German radio had spoken of progress along the Volga, of factories captured, of Soviet forces on the brink. Now the tone shifts. The language grows solemn. The word surrender is avoided, but the truth is clear. Across Germany, families unfold letters that will never be answered. In Munich, Karl's mother stands in her kitchen holding the last postcard he sent in October. The ink has faded slightly at the edges. She reads the simple lines again. He wrote about cold mornings, about hoping to be home by spring. She does not yet know he is alive in captivity. She only knows that something has ended. In the Soviet Union, news spreads with a different rhythm. In Moscow, church bells ring. Factory sirens sound not as warnings, but as signals of victory. Yet even in celebration, the cost is visible. Hospitals are filled. Entire divisions have been erased from the rolls. Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov is granted a brief rest after weeks at the front. He walks through what remains of Stalingrad. The city is almost unrecognizable. Chimneys stand alone where homes once stood. The Red October factory is a skeleton of steel and brick. He pauses near the Volga. The ice has begun to crack as temperatures slowly rise. Beneath the surface, the river continues its patient flow, as it did before the battle and as it will long after. For the first time in months, he allows himself to think beyond tomorrow. The defeat at Stalingrad sends shockwaves across Europe. Allied governments take notice. In Washington and London, military planners study the reports carefully. The image of German invincibility built on swift campaigns across Poland, France, and the Balkans has been shattered. The Eastern Front is turned. For Adolf Hitler, the loss is both military and symbolic. An entire army destroyed. A city bearing the name of his enemy not only defended but held. The promise that no ground would be yielded at any cost has led to catastrophe. For Friedrich Paulus, captivity begins a different chapter. Once a careful planner, commanding hundreds of thousands, he now faces interrogation and uncertainty. His promotion to field marshal, only days before surrender, becomes a bitter footnote. For the soldiers who survived, the memory of Stalingrad will not fade. Karl Weiss marches east into a vast and unfamiliar landscape. Prisoner columns stretch for miles. Guards urge them forward through snow and mud. Hunger follows them, so does silence. He thinks about the first day he saw the Volga from a distant hill. It had seemed so close, so reachable. The river had shimmered under the sun, promising completion. Now it feels like the edge of a world he misunderstood. Back in the ruins, Soviet troops begin the long process of clearing debris. Civilians emerge from cellars where they have lived for months. They search for family members. They search for food. They search for pieces of normal life. Stalingrad is a victory, but it is also a scar. Military historians will later point to the battle as a decisive turning point in the Second World War. After February 1943, German forces on the Eastern Front will fight mostly on the defensive. Initiative shifts. Momentum changes direction. But in the winter of 1943, none of that is clear yet. What is clear is the human cost. More than 2 million soldiers and civilians were killed, wounded, or captured during the campaign. Streets that once carried trams and children now hold only rubble and memory. The myth of unstoppable advance has frozen and cracked in the snows along the Volga. For American viewers watching decades later, it may seem distant, almost unreal, yet the lessons remain close. Overconfidence, stretched supply lines, underestimating terrain and weather, ignoring warnings from the ground. Winter does not negotiate. Geography does not bend to ambition. In August, fire fell from the sky and a great army marched toward a river. By February, the same army stood hungry and surrounded beneath a frozen horizon. Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov looks once more across the broken skyline. Smoke thins. The sky clears. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer strikes steel as rebuilding begins. The battle is over. The war continues. But at Stalingrad, in the heart of winter, history shifted.